Morning Pitt fans. Your Pitt Panthers are 6-2. Your Pitt Panthers have won 4 games in a row. Your Pitt Panthers are 4-1 in the ACC. Mason Heintschel is good again. The defense is about as resilient as you're going to find a unit can be. The playmakers are making plays. The offensive skill guys are getting big plays. Pitt's putting up points. They're playing tough defense. Their special teams is still pretty good. And Pitt fans, like I said, your team is 6-2. After the Panthers beat NC State on Saturday at Acrisure Stadium, 53-34, one of the more unique scores we've seen. I don't think it ended up being a scoregami, but it was certainly one of the first, maybe the only time I've ever seen a game 53-34, at least one that comes to mind. We've got far more interesting things to talk about than just that score. After Pitt had, one heck of a game on Saturday against NC State. One heck of a game. And I don't know if NC State's as good as Pat Narduzzi made them out to be. I think they've got some talent at some positions, and some spots they're also a little bit weak. But what I do know is that Pitt went out there on Saturday, went up and down the field on offense, and made enough plays on defense with a severely short-handed defense to get that win and continue this narrative we've been talking about here for the last couple of weeks, and certainly talked about it a lot last week. The opportunity to really do something and have some games that are really, really interesting. They've just got to get past Stanford this weekend, but we'll have plenty of time to talk about Stanford all week this week. We'll have time to talk about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports, but today it's all about Pitt's win over NC State. It's the Monday Thoughts on Saturday's game. That's what we do here on Monday in the Morning Pit, so let's do it. Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. There's no point in doing the whole, if I had told you after they lost to Louisville that they'd be in this position, that whole thing doesn't serve any purpose. I never really get, too caught up in that. I tend to stay in the moment a lot more, rather than saying, man, can you believe how far they've come? All I know, to me, this season, there's the first 4 games, and then there's the last 4 games, the most recent 4 games. And then obviously there's 4 more games, at which point I'm going to think of the season in quarters, 3, mostly the last quarter being those final 3 games. But the first 4 games happened, and they happened in a very different situation with different circumstances and, quite frankly, a different team. And the most recent 4 games have happened with a team led by, you just saw him on the screen a second ago, Mason Heintschel. And in those 4 games, Pitt is 4-0. In those 4 games, they've lodged, 2 of the biggest wins they've had against an ACC opponent. I think it's only, they've only scored 50 against an ACC opponent a couple times since Pat Narduzzi became head coach. They've never beaten an ACC opponent, or maybe only once they've beaten an ACC opponent by as much as they did against Boston College. When they won that game 48-7, they put up 53 against NC State, and they are just rolling right now. Rolling. And I think we went into Saturday's game with a lot of questions. And I think a lot of those questions were answered affirmatively or positively with what happened on Saturday afternoon into early Saturday evening. I think one of the biggest questions we went into that game with was, how's Mason Heintschel going to bounce back? Did Syracuse figure him out? Did Syracuse figure something out about Pitt's blocking schemes, or figure something out about Pitt's freshman quarterback, or figure something out about this or something out about that? After Mason Heintschel, threw for 140 yards, no touchdowns against Syracuse, 1 interception. Pitt's offense was held under 300 yards. They scored 30 points, but a lot of, short field, not a lot of actual offensive touchdowns, 7 sacks, just a bad game for the offense. Bloom is off the rose. Got the big wins over Boston College and Florida State, but now that the tape is out there, now these teams know what Mason Heintschel can do and what to expect, and they're going to shut him down. Well, that was a real question going into Saturday's game against NC State. Is that the case? Did Syracuse figure something out? Did they put it on tape the way that we sort of thought Cal did last year with Eli Holstein? Well, if Syracuse put something on tape and NC State tried to copy it, I would say Pitt adjusted to it pretty well, because Pitt went out more than 500 yards of total offense. Mason Heintschel throws for 423 and 3 touchdowns. Just an outstanding performance from the freshman quarterback. Pitt's offense goes up and down the field. I want to say they had 13 possessions. And I wrote this down. I have a lot of 15 total possessions. Mason Heintschel was on the field for 13 of those possessions. On Mason Heintschel's 13 possessions against NC State, Pitt scored or had a field goal attempt on 11 of the 13 drives. So they had 6 touchdowns, 4 made field goals, and 1 missed field goal. Incidentally, Trey Bukowski's first miss since the West Virginia game after making like 16 in a row. So, 13 possessions, they get 6 touchdowns, 4 field goals, and a field goal attempt. And they punted twice. I mean, that's effectiveness. That's going up and down the field. And in a lot of those situations, particularly in the second half, NC State gave them short fields because they were stuffed on 4th down. But Pitt was able to cash in, and Pitt was able to score. And they were able to put this game away on both sides of the ball. And we'll get to the defense in a second. But I think if there was a single biggest question going into this one, something Pitt fans were wondering about the most, maybe worried about the most, it was how would Mason Heintschel perform after having a game where he didn't play well at all. And I can't really think of another way to say it other than he was pretty awesome. 28 of 48 for 423 and 3 touchdowns. Completion percentage less than 60%. But again, I don't know about you. I didn't feel like, boy, he's missing on 40% of his passes or 42% of his passes. Like, I felt like he was more efficient than that 58% would indicate. I felt like he spread the ball around well. I think 10 different players caught passes. 11 different players were targeted with passes. A bunch of guys caught 2 passes, 3, 4, 5, 7. I mean, really spread the ball around, got different receivers and running backs and tight ends involved. And made a lot of different types of passes. He did a good job. I think 8 of his 28 completions were 4 to 9 yard pickups, which I think is one of the biggest things Mason Heintschel needed to do and improve. An area where he needed to improve from the Syracuse game was just take what the defense was giving him, take those short passes. But he was also firing away. 17 of Mason Heintschel's 28 completions gained at least 10 yards. 10 of the 28 completions gained at least 15 yards, and he had 6 passes of 20 yards or more. 29, 22, 23, 26, 28, and of course the 84-yard touchdown bomb to Blue Hicks where, I mean, it was just all working. At that point, it was all clicking for Mason Heintschel. He was sharp. He spread the ball around. He took what the defense gave him. There were still times where he maybe tried to get a little bit more than he should have. He had one pass that was almost intercepted and probably could have been intercepted if he didn't throw it 100 miles an hour. He was trying, I think, to hit a tight end. And there was a linebacker standing right in front of him. It was actually reminiscent of the interception that I think Eli Holstein threw against might have been Central Michigan. It was reminiscent of that. It was in the same area of the field and everything. But the worst thing about Mason Heintschel's near interception, and the guy didn't catch it, so Pitt maintained possession, and Heintschel got out of this game without any turnovers. But the worst thing about it is Desmond Reed was like 2 feet away from that linebacker or whoever it was. And so instead of needing to trying to force the ball to Justin Holmes or whoever it was, 10 or 12 or 15 yards down the field, he's got Desmond Reed for a 4 or 5 yard pickup, maybe 6. And as we all know, if you give Desmond Reed the ball 4 or 5 yards downfield, there's a good chance that the play will actually end 20 yards downfield because Desmond Reed has a knack for doing that. And even if he doesn't, 4 or 5 or 6 yards is a good pickup. So one mistake there for Mason Heintschel. I'm sure he'd probably look at it and say there were a few other mistakes that he made. But the continued learning process and the fact that he came out of the Syracuse game where he really struggled, he was sacked 7 times, missed on a lot of throws, and just generally was uncomfortable, tried to push the ball downfield too much, didn't take what was there. He didn't overcorrect and attempt 48 passes, make 28 completions, and they're all 5 yard passes. So he got a lot of those 4 to 9 yard pickups, but he was also trying to, go downfield, even at a medium distance. Like I say, 17 passes that gained 10 yards or more, 17 completions out of his 28 that gained 10 yards or more. So he was still aggressive, but maybe smarter in his aggressiveness than he had been against Syracuse, and maybe even and against Florida State too. I would think you could say that he was not quite as smart in the aggressiveness in that game as he needed to be. And so what you're seeing, I think, is a young quarterback who just week after week is learning lessons. I mean, they often say it's a cliche that, when you're a young player like this, every time you step on the field, there are lessons to learn, and probably, for older players as well. But certainly for a true freshman quarterback, every time you step on the field, every time the ball is snapped, there's something you can learn from what happens. And Mason Heintschel looks like he's learning a lot from all of those situations and learning a lot from what happens every time he steps on the field, and he just keeps getting better and better. 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions over the course of his 4 starts so far. And, of course, most importantly, Pitt is 4-0 since Mason Heintschel took over. I want to get to the defense, but, quick shout-out to Kenny Johnson, his 3rd career 100-yard game. He had 7 for 112 and a touchdown, all in the first half. He got hurt on the touchdown play, which was a pretty tough 10-yard score after a screen pass. He did not play in the second half. He had his arm, I can't say it was in a sling, but it was inside his coat and at a right angle. So, you draw your own conclusions on that. I didn't actually see the sling, so I can't say that. I did see the boot on Desmond Reed's ankle after he left the game. His left ankle in a boot. So, that's something to monitor. But Kenny Johnson, 3 100-yard games. Pitt is 3-0 when Kenny Johnson has 100 yards in a game, 100 receiving yards, I should say. And 2 of those 3 have come with Mason Heintschel at quarterback. One, the Boston College game, and then this game against NC State. Blue Hicks also goes for 120 on 4 catches and a touchdown. He had the big 84-yard grab. Raphael Williams, 5 for 62 and a touchdown. Just a good job spreading the ball around, and a good job by those guys getting open and making plays. As much as, I think when we came into the season, I had my questions about the receiving core. I had my questions about the tight ends. I think both have been pleasant surprises this season. I think Pitt's receivers have been really good, as a matter of fact. I think they're getting open, they're getting where they're supposed to be, and they're making plays after the catch. 423 receiving yards on Saturday, 189 were after the catch. Of course, Blue Hicks had 53 of those because he had the long play. But, Kenny Johnson had 48 yards after the catch. Des Reed had 24 yards after the catch. Deuce Spann had 14 yards after the catch. They're making plays. They're making plays, and they just need the quarterback to get the ball to them. And that's probably wasn't happening enough or efficiently or effectively enough in the first 4 games, and it's what's been happening really well in certainly 3 out of the last 4 games, and even, to some, I think Heintschel still had some really nice passes in the Syracuse game as well. So a lot to like about Pitt's offense, pretty much everything to like about Pitt's offense in that game. They were 6 of 14 on 3rd down, 1 of 1 on 4th down, so I believe they're now a perfect 7 of 7 on 4th down with Mason Heintschel at quarterback. But I think as much as that might have been the biggest question mark heading into the game, how will Mason Heintschel and the offense bounce back? I almost feel like I'm burying the lead by not talking about the defense yet. Because that defensive performance, for a game where the defense gave up 34 points and 445 yards, that might be the best 34-point and 445-yard performance I've ever seen from a defense. Just outstanding play from those guys. Gritty, digging deep, heart, emotion, togetherness, whatever you want to call it. They played their tails off. And, probably if the Panther-Lair postgame show ever became more of a blue program, we would probably have different choice words to say about how hard the defense played in that game. But we avoided that on Saturday night, and certainly here the Morning Pitt on Monday mornings, a family program, so we're not going to say those words. But they deserve every bit of it. Whatever obscenity you want to come up with to describe the performance of Pitt's defense in that game positively, let it fly, because they deserve every single bit. Being down Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles and Nick Lappy, so you're down, half of your 2 deep. In addition to the 2 linebackers who were out before the season even started, in addition to the defensive end hits that they've been taking, they finally got Blaine Spires back. In addition to Cruz Brookins leaving this game in I think the first quarter or the first half after he got hurt, so you're down at safety as well. You've got, at one point you had a true freshman on the field at cornerback, a true freshman on the field at safety, a safety transfer from UC Davis playing linebacker, a defensive end playing defensive tackle and sort of playing defensive end, but also playing defensive tackle. You had a redshirt freshman playing every snap with the starters at linebacker. It was cobbled together. It was shorthanded. It was undermanned, and it was really good, like really stout. And they did stuff. They did things in that game defensively that we have not seen Pitt's defense do with Pat Narduzzi, either in terms of changing personnel or the formations they used or the alignments that they use. I wrote an article on Panther-Lair.com yesterday. Kavir Baines-Marquez basically did triple duty on Pitt's defense. He didn't start the game, but he came in on the second snap and played outside linebacker. And then he moved into this third down package where he was basically a deep center field safety as one of three safeties on the field, but all three playing back. And then later he was playing free safety, field safety in the base defense. Kavir Baines-Marquez was all over the place. And this is what they did throughout the game. They started the game. Abe Ibrahim, walk-on linebacker from Bashar Valley, gets the start as part of an all-WPIAL linebacking crew to start the game. He starts at middle linebacker. Braylon Lovelace, who has started every game this season at money linebacker. This is actually, like, I should write this down because as I say this, you're going to lose it. You're going to be like, wait, what? Who was doing what? So you start off with Abe Ibrahim in the middle, Braylon Lovelace, who has started every game at middle linebacker, now playing money linebacker, and Cam Lindsey, making his first career start, plays at star linebacker. Okay. They run one play. NC State gets 0 yards. Ibrahim goes out. Lovelace moves back to the middle. Lindsey moves over to the money. And Kavir Baines-Marquez comes in and plays the star linebacker. Okay. Then they get like 2 or 3 yards, so it's third and long, and Pitt goes to a brand new package. They've always had this Delta defensive sub package, right? Like we've talked about this for 11 years now. 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers, 3 safeties, and 2 corners. This is what they do. And that extra safety who comes in usually plays almost like a slot corner type of role. He's in the middle of the defense. They actually call it the star. It's almost like a linebacker position. Well, they don't do that, because they're down on linebackers. They don't have Rasheem Biles. They don't have Kyle Lewis. They don't have Nick Lappy. They're down on linebackers, so they invent a new package, and they call it the Night Stalkers, after the group of Delta Force guys or whatever you want to call them who killed Osama bin Laden. I'm not making this up. I told you I would need to write all this down for you to keep up with it. And so for this package, instead of 3 down linemen, 2 ends and a tackle, they go with 4 defensive linemen. And basically, it's 3 defensive ends and 1 tackle. Well, actually, it's 2 defensive ends and 2 tackles, except one of those guys is Isaiah Neal, who used to be a defensive tackle, but he moved to defensive end because there were injuries that caused him to have to move outside. And now he's playing again, but he's not lining up as a defensive end, and there's 2 other DNs on the field, Joey Zielinski and Jimmy Scott. So Isaiah Neal is kind of a defensive tackle again, except he's lined up in between the ends, but he doesn't have his hand on the ground. He's standing up, and he's moving around. He's shifting this way, he's shifting that way. Sometimes he's outside the end, sometimes he's between the ends. And so basically there were 4 defensive linemen on the field, but it was like 2 ends, a tackle, and Isaiah Neal being like this stand-up rover thing. There were 2 linebackers, Lovelace and Lindsey, and then the 2 corners, and then 3 safeties. So it would be, initially Javon McIntyre, Cruz Brookins with Kavir Baines-Marquez in between them. Something we've never seen. There were like once or twice when they played against Syracuse, they used like a traditional 4-2-5 nickel where the extra defensive back was a corner. But like it was 1 game, maybe 2. And they've never used it otherwise. And today, or Saturday, they rolled out a brand new package. This package that was effectively a 4-2-5. Totally new stuff. And they're moving guys all over the place. And, it's one thing to have a new package and put it in the offseason or a bye week, but to put it in over the course of 1 week and then trust it on the field, like that's tough. That's nervy. But that's what the Pitt coaches did because that's what they felt like they had to do. And they felt like they could rely on the players to execute it. And they were right. The players executed it. And you say, oh, Chris, well, NC State scored, 5 touchdowns? I mean, how good is that? They had 445 yards. Okay, let's talk about what NC State did. All right, first quarter, they get a touchdown on a 74-yard drive. 6 plays, 74 yards. They just did bubble screens. Bubble screen. Bubble, 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 bubble. They bubbled Pitt to death, which was something that, you can only do that once, Like Miami in 2021 ran a bunch of screens to get their first touchdown. You can only get away with that once, and then the defense is going to adjust, and they did. And I don't think those bubbles really got much at all after that. But they got one drive out of it. Okay, whatever. You get into the second quarter, Hollywood Smothers, holiday smoothie. First down, first play of the drive from the 35 after a kickoff out of bounds. He takes a handoff. Bad run fit from inexperienced players on the field. He goes 65 yards for a touchdown. It happens. Like, I mean, when you have inexperienced players, they're going to make a mistake. You just hope that when that mistake comes, it doesn't cost you like 6 points, 7 points, which that one did because Hollywood Smothers is fast enough to run away from those guys. And they get another touchdown in the first half, and it comes on the trick play, which, again, you're taking advantage of inexperienced players, which is what you should do. Target your opponent's weakness and vulnerability, and that's what happened. So they get touchdowns that way. Bubble drive, can't do it again. Hollywood Smothers finds the one time Pitt had a bad run fit and goes 65 yards, and then they run a trick play. So at halftime, NC State's got 3 touchdowns, and you're saying to yourself, Pitt's going to need to score 50 just to stay ahead in this thing. And then they come out in the third quarter. NC State did not score in the third quarter, and they had 35 yards of offense. Pitt's defense shut them down. The bubble screen drive wasn't going to work again. They weren't going to have another bad run fit to give up a 65-yard touchdown run. And they weren't going to get beat by another trick play. They shut them down. And in the fourth quarter, they get a touchdown drive, a 9-play, 70-yard touchdown drive against Pitt's, what counts as their starting defense, even though it was made up of a lot of 2s and even 3s in some cases. But on that drive, they got him in 3rd and 10 and 3rd and 8. Both times C.J. Bailey scrambled and picked up a first down. And then their touchdown play, a 30-yard touchdown, Josh Garrier slipped. And so I'm pretty sure Garrier breaks up the pass or at least causes his fall incomplete in some way, but he slipped and fell. So, it became an easy throw and catch for a touchdown. That's the touchdown. And then they get one more touchdown, and it was against Pitt's 3rd team, 4th team defense. True freshmen are out there, walk-ons, guys that you probably haven't seen on the field before. And unless you're a real diehard, which, I mean, by watching this podcast, you are, you might not even know who they are. And so they get a touchdown against that. So Pitt's starting defense gave up a bubble drive, a bad run fit for a 65-yard touchdown, a trick play, and then another touchdown where the safety and coverage in the fourth quarter, when Pitt was up 3 or 4 scores, the safety and coverage fell down, slipped on the Acrisure surface. So the final numbers end up being 34 points and 445 yards. But for Pitt's starting defense, made up of a lot of guys who weren't intended to be starters when this season began, did a lot better than that. And Kavir Baines-Marquez, I don't even think he's an honorary Shark. He's just a legit, straight-up Shark. He is part of the group. So is Cam Lindsey. Just one of those performances that you look back on years later. And if you really follow these things closely, and I think the people who watch these podcasts, the people who subscribe to Panther-Lair.com, you do follow these things closely. And close enough that years later you'll say, you remember that NC State game where Pitt was missing everybody on defense and they still went out and just battled? This will be a game that you remember. This will be a game you reflect back on. And it's a huge win. It's a huge win. And now there's one more that you got to get so you can go into the off week and then that November stretch run at 7-2. It's all right there for you. It's all right there for you. And Pitt's going to go to Stanford this Saturday. Already installed as a 2-touchdown favorite on the road. Those big numbers scare me, man. They really do. All right, we got a lot to talk about this week for sure. Of course, there's an exhibition game tonight. Pitt basketball playing Pitt UPJ at the Peterson Event Center. We'll be there with coverage from that, and we'll talk about it probably not tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll recap Pat Narduzzi's Monday press conference. We'll probably talk hoops on Wednesday, more football on Thursday, mailbag on Friday, and all counting down to Pitt Stanford, 3:30 Eastern time on Saturday. Of course, we'll have a post-game show after that. Listen, I was just looking at the numbers. We are under 100 subscribers here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We are under 100 subscribers away from 5,000. I think it'd be really, really cool to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of this football season. I think it'd be even cooler to get to 5,000 subscribers by the time they get to the Notre Dame game or even by the end of this week. So if you watch these videos, if you listen to the podcast, whatever it might be, go click the button. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't lock you into anything. It's not going to get your phone number on lists or political anything. Like, it's just trying to build those. I think it'd be really great if we could get to 5,000 subscribers. So do me a favor, click that subscribe button. It's right down there, right? Trying to point to it. There it is. I think I'm pointing at it. Subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That'd be great. And then also you can turn on your alerts so you never miss when we go live for our post-game shows on Saturday after the game. You know, we don't know what time that's going to start exactly, but if you subscribe and you turn on notifications, you can get an alert sent to your phone, and then you'll know when we go live. So do that. Like this video and subscribe. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, Pitt wins. They're 6-2, 4-1 in the ACC, and it's all still out there in front of them. Can't wait to see what happens on Saturday, but we got a lot to talk about before we get to that point. All right, thanks for watching today. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope your week gets off to a great start, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.